How is it possible for a person tasked with protecting the most vulnerable lives to find gratification in bringing them to the brink of death? What psychological mechanism allows someone to crave the praise of a hero while simultaneously acting as a hand of fate? In the late 1970s and early 1980s, a pediatric nurse in Texas became the common denominator in a series of medical emergencies that defied statistical probability. The evidence suggests we aren't just looking at a series of tragedies, but a calculated pattern of intentional crises created to satisfy a deep pathological need for significance. Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Genene Jones case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations, not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. When we look at the early life of Genene Jones, we see a pattern of early childhood instability that often serves as a precursor to complex personality pathology. Jones was born in 1950 and was immediately placed for adoption, which is our first significant psychological indicator. While many individuals who are adopted lead healthy lives, the primal wound of early maternal separation can sometimes manifest as a lifelong struggle with attachment and a desperate need for control. Jones was adopted by Dick and Gladys Jones, but the family dynamic was marred by a significant trauma. She lost two brothers during the formative years, one to a terminal illness and another in a tragic accident involving a home-built pipe bomb. In psychology, we often see that early exposure to sudden violent death can desensitize a child or conversely mark them as obsessed with the power in life and death. Jones was often described by those who knew her in her youth as a compulsive liar and a social outcast who frequently fabricated stories to garner sympathy. This behavior is a major red flag for fictitious disorder, where an individual acts as if they have a physical or mental illness when they are not really sick. However, as she entered the medical field, this need for attention evolved into something far more dangerous, known as fictitious disorder imposed on another. By the time she began her nursing career at Bexar County Medical District Hospital in San Antonio in 1978, the stage was set for a deadly psychological game. Why would a nurse who spent years training to heal choose to administer lethal doses of medication to infants? The motive isn't money or traditional malice, but rather a hero complex, where the perpetrator creates a crisis just so they can be the one to save the patient. When the pediatric intensive care unit started seeing a 178% increase in infant deaths, the common thread was always the presence of Jones. If we look at her behavior during these codes, she didn't show the typical stress or grief of a medical professional. She appeared energized and vitalized. This suggests a profound lack of empathy, a core trait of antisocial personality features, where the suffering of others is merely a backdrop for one's own emotional gratification. Have you ever wondered if someone's need for validation could outweigh their basic human instinct to protect a child? During her time at the hospital, Jones worked a 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, which became known among the staff as the death shift. Despite the mounting bodies, the hospital administration's response was not to investigate her for murder, but to request her resignation to avoid potential lawsuits. This systematic failure highlights a psychological phenomenon called institutional narcissism, where an organization protects its own image at the expense of human life. Jones moved on to a private clinic in Caryville, Texas, run by Dr. Kathleen Holland, where the pattern immediately resumed. In 1982, a 15-month-old girl named Chelsea went into a clinic for routine immunizations and left in the back of an ambulance. Jones had injected the toddler with a powerful muscle relaxant that caused total paralysis, including the muscles used for breathing. Imagine the psychological profile of a person who can look into the eyes of the conscious, paralyzed child and wait for the heart to stop just to demonstrate their recitation skills. This isn't just a crime of opportunity. It's a crime of profound betrayal of the caregiver-patient bond. Is the thrill of playing God the ultimate addiction for a person who feels invisible in their daily life? Witnesses at the Caryville Clinic noted that Jones seemed almost giddy when Chelsea went into respiratory rest, taking over the situation with an unsettling level of calm. When Chelsea eventually died during a transfer to the hospital in San Antonio, Jones insisted on holding the child's body in the front seat of the transport vehicle. Psychologically, this behavior points toward a merging with the victim, where the perpetrator views the victim as a prop in their own life drama, rather than a separate human being. Her need to be the center of the grieving process is a classic indicator of a narcissistic personality, seeking narcissistic supply from the tragedy she created. The investigation eventually led to her conviction in 1984 for the murder of Chelsea and the injury of another child, Rolando. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison, but due to a mandatory release law in Texas aimed at reducing prison overcrowding, she was scheduled for release in 2018. The psychological impact on the families of the victims was immense, as they faced the reality that the serial killer in Scrubs might walk free. However, in 2017, new indictments were brought against her for the deaths of 5 other children dating back to 1981 and 1982. The why behind her actions likely stems from a deep-seated feeling of inadequacy that could only be silenced by the high-stakes environment of a medical emergency. In a clinical sense, we look at the concept of a malignant grandiosity, where an individual feels they are the only ones capable of handling a crisis. Jones didn't just want to be a nurse. She wanted to be the most important person in the room, the one who fought against death itself. The fact that she was the one who invited death into the room in the first place reveals a circular delusional logic of her pathology. Can a person truly feel safe in a system that allows a predator to hide behind a professional license for years? When we analyze the testimony from her colleagues, a picture emerges of a woman who was volatile, manipulative, and highly skilled at gaslighting those around her. She would often suggest that other nurses were incompetent, further positioning herself as the superior caregiver. This type of lateral violence in the workplace is a psychological red flag that often masks a much deeper intentions. Her transition from the Bexar County to Caryville showed a predatory grooming of her new employer, Dr. Holland, who initially defended Jones against all accusations. This ability to charm and manipulate authority figures is a hallmark of high-functioning psychopathy. It allows the perpetrator to operate in plain sight, using their good reputation as a shield against any mounting evidence of their crimes. Jones would eventually attend the funerals of the children she killed, sometimes even singing or crying the loudest among the mourners. This performance of grief serves as a dual purpose. It reinforces her status as a caring nurse and allows her to relive the moment of power she held over the victim. From a mental health perspective, this is a form of emotional vampirism, where the perpetrator feeds off the genuine pain of the bereaved families. How many red flags must be ignored by a community before a protector is recognized as a predator? The sheer number of suspicious incidents involving Jones is estimated by some investigators to be as high as 60 infants. The psychological toll on the surviving children, some of whom suffered permanent brain damage due to oxygen deprivation, is a lifelong sentence. In 2020, Jones pleaded guilty to the 1981 murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer as a part of a plea deal to ensure she would never be released. During the proceedings, she remained largely stoic, showing little of the dramatic emotion she was known for during her years in the hospital. This shift to a cold, detached demeanor is common when a narcissist loses their audience and their power. She is currently serving her life sentence. The psychological why remains a study in the darkness of the human ego. We see a woman who lacked a core sense of self and attempted to build one out of the life force of others. Her story serves as a haunting reminder of the importance of clinical oversight and the need to listen to quiet warnings of those working on the front lines. Okay, so this is an ultimate betrayal of trust. I mean, if you think about it, when we go to the hospital or you have a loved one that goes to the hospital, we don't really know the doctors or the nurses, those who are caring for our loved ones. There's an implicit trust. We don't know them individually, but we know the profession. We trust the profession. We trust that there's a proper vetting going on. We trust that there's proper oversight going on. What we don't expect is the people who take care of us in the hospital are the ones that are going to kill us. I can imagine what the families of those children who were the victims of Jones, what they were thinking and how they were feeling. I'm sure that they were probably asking themselves, how could we trust anybody ever again in the hospital? Makes sense. Wow, this was a really tragic story. What did you think about the case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.